All right, everyone. It looks like we are live. Hello and welcome to this week's stream. And my name is Ashley Stuart. I talk about what it's like living with migraines and also talk about what it's like being in remission with IIH. So today I'm going to be talking about meditation practice because I have a lot of things that I like to talk about on this channel. And I've talked about this quite a bit, but I want to keep emphasizing this because when people kind of approach me and ask me what I'm doing, I kind of default to my medication as being the reason why I'm feeling so good today and doing so well. However, meditation is probably the second most important factor in all of this and why I am doing as well as I am. So I'm going to be getting very in-depth in this video. I know this topic isn't popular. I know it's not something everyone wants to hear about, but it has been a very, very important tool for me. And it's been a tool that I think I've underemphasized to a major extent, actually. So that being said, before I get into today's intro, or before I get into today's topic, let's get into the intro. All right, everyone, welcome back. So this video, like I said, is going to be talking about a topic that I honestly would say is the most important topic in my life. And a lot of it could be that I just got back from a meditation retreat that has felt like it's changed so much in some ways, and some things haven't changed post-retreat. I would say actually a majority of things haven't changed post-retreat, but there's been so many things that I just feel like this is such an important thing for me to stress with the meditation. So it helps me manage my chronic pain. When I sit and notice extra pain, I will often use this as my meditation object over my breath. I actually use this object a lot during retreat because sitting completely still for 40 to 45 minutes was not only extremely difficult, but extremely painful. So if you were at the retreat and you were watching me, I would actually get up quite frequently, well, a lot more than I do actually during a normal day if I was to just be sitting there, because it was so silent in the room. Like, you could hear people move and shuffle around if they were moving, and at least I didn't want to be that person. So my goal, and actually I've been working on this for a while, has been to sit as still as I can for my meditation time. Like, it's been a bit of a challenge, actually. I've made a bit of a challenge for myself to see how long I can sit there without moving, and trying to meditate on whatever happens during that time. It's been something I've worked on, but it was something I really was working on during the retreat. And so that being said, I had a lot of pain. You not only get pain in your neck and all of that, and I have natural pain in my neck from having migraines, but you get sore in places that you wouldn't expect. So I was actually having a lot of pain in the lower back. So for those of you who don't know, when you're going through an IIH diagnosis, you actually need to have a spinal tap done, and they do this to check the opening pressure as well as check for reasons why your spinal fluid is elevated actually in the fluid itself, to make sure that there isn't anything in the fluid that could be causing or as a result of something that might be going on. So you need to have a spinal tap done as a part of this, at least as far as I know. Everybody, pretty much in every case, they do a spinal tap. Even though I've only ever had one spinal tap, unlike many who have multiple spinal taps during their journey with IIH, it's actually really common for doctors to do multiple ones because they find that doing a spinal tap will relieve pressure for those people who aren't successful with other methods. I think it's a bad thing to be doing just because it really doesn't take long before the pressure comes back up again if that's what's going on. But anyways, that's just a side topic for another time. But anyways, the point is that because I had to have the spinal tap and I also needed a blood patch to repair the leak after the spinal tap and had to have multiple needles put in my back in 1 week, I have very, very intense lower back pain sometimes. I also notice this during my period. Many women do. But when I was sitting, because I was sitting on the floor and using a back jack, I found it the most comfortable because I'm actually too short to reach the floor on a normal chair. I could do that if I had one of the meditation cushions underneath. I was actually pretty comfortable because my feet were flat on something. But because I'm so short, my feet actually normally don't reach. So I was sitting like cross-legged like this on the chair, and it was just really, really painful. Like, you'll actually notice that I'm sitting cross-legged right now. It's because I can't reach the floor. But anyways, so yeah, like that. But anyways, so yeah, it was really, really difficult for me to find a comfortable position at the start. And we spent multiple hours a day in meditation. It wasn't really, really intense. Like, it wasn't a majority. I wouldn't say it was a majority of it. Well, maybe. So the morning consisted of mainly guided meditations and silent sittings. In the afternoon, we had a solid few hours, though, before we were in meditation again. And then there was talks and like poetry rounds and all of that. So it didn't really feel like you were meditating that whole time, but you kind of were. And so finding a comfortable position was, for me, one of the most important things. But there were times when it wasn't comfortable. So you would meditate on the pain. And it really, really helped me with meditating on pain. And this is something that I try to do when I'm having a rough time with my chronic pain as it is. Like, I'll meditate on the pain. If I notice it's something that's really, really strong, I will sit there and I will meditate on the pain. Okay, I just gotta adjust again. Okay, here we go. Okay. So meditating on pain is something that you can often work quite a bit on, and it's something that I'm still trying to master, so I'm not really going to get much into details about that, but that's essentially what's happening. So meditation is also known to help reduce stress. I can tell you this from personal experience that high stress and anxiety only makes me feel worse. So because of my meditation practice now, I can actually pick up on when I'm stressed before I actually know why I'm stressed. And it'll feel like this deep down pit in your stomach. Like, you just feel like something is off. Now, this stress and anxiety could be something that's coming up in the shadow work, which I'm going to get into in a minute or in a little bit. But it can also be that something unconsciously is coming up and wanting to be seen and wanting to be acknowledged. And this does help, not only because you're often diving into deep presence, and so you're naturally put into kind of a more like, it's really hard to describe. The best way I can describe it for you guys is if you've ever experienced a flow state. That is what I think consistent meditation does. And I can tell you that basically personal experience, because right now I'm able to achieve a flow state very easily. Still, it's not as easy as when I first got back from retreat, but I tell you, most days I spend in a state of flow, and it's wonderful. I absolutely love it. And So if you've ever experienced a flow state or runner's high or kind of something like that, it's very similar to that when you're in a deep meditative present state. If that's the way I want to describe it. This stuff cannot be described like when you start getting into the deeper stuff because it's beyond words. And I emphasized that in my meditation retreat, but it's important for me to emphasize that now. Like, I can only talk about certain parts of this and how it's benefited my life. And it's all just thought. Like, when you sit here and you're like talking about this, you got to remember that you're speaking in a way that is actually downgrading the experience, because you really do have to experience it in order to get the full picture. A lot of times I do what is called natural meditation, and this is where you sit and let whatever arise just be and then naturally go. This is when you kind of just let whatever's on your mind just come to the surface and go, I hear you, I see you, I acknowledge you, and then you let it go. And I often have a lot of different types of thoughts come up during this. It can be creative thoughts. It can be something, a direction I want to go with the channel. You acknowledge it. You put it off to the side and you hope you remember it when you're done. But not only that, but stuff what you're struggling with can also come up too. So this can be like just in your everyday life, you're having a conflict that comes up. So something at work, something with your family, something at school, probably if you were doing education or some type of thing. And so these subtle things that are on your mind can come up, and it's just about acknowledging them. And people think that meditation is about getting rid of thoughts. It's not. It's just acknowledging the thoughts that come up. And that's what happens with natural meditation. Actually, I would say a majority of the time, I don't use koans or all of that. I sit there and do natural meditation because I find it's the most natural, ironically, in this case, because I'm using the word natural. But it's the thing that feels the right in the moment. And there are some times where I will focus on other things, but generally I would say do natural meditation most of the time. And it's because it feels right. And you acknowledge why you're kind of doing a meditation practice at the start, but what happens during a meditation session is kind of what's meant to happen. I hope that probably isn't going to make any sense, but it's the best way I can explain it. Something I do want to stress, and I didn't do well of this at the meditation retreat itself. Like when I talked about the meditation retreat in that video, I kind of only talked about the positive things, and I should have talked about how much I struggle as well and how much I struggled with that week. It was not all sunshine and rainbows. There was some really, really difficult moments. So the pain was difficult, but I had a few times where I was dealing with a lot of emotions. Now, I've done a lot of emotion work on my own, and so that's why I'm not sure, I'm not going to speculate as to why that didn't come up. If it didn't come up, it wasn't meant to be. But there were definitely times where I had doubts, and I was definitely uncomfortable. There was multiple reasons for that. You're dealing with not only being in a strange place, but strange food. So this place was it was vegan, but it was wonderful in a way because almost everything was gluten-free. And there's one difference between being vegan and being gluten-free, and that's, for the most part, I don't think I know anyone who has to eat vegan. Meanwhile, I absolutely have to eat gluten-free. That being said, my stomach was struggling because I'm not used to that much of a plant-based diet. But it was wonderful because there was ability to try new things. I felt really in my element that way. And also scared at the same time because you don't know how you're going to react. Meditation retreats can be scary though because you don't really know how that particular retreat is going to end up. Like, you can have meditation retreats that are really, really peaceful. That's what happened with me. But you can have meditation retreats that are really, really, really difficult as well. And it can be like that during your normal daily practice. So there are some meditations where I dive into a deep presence and a deep, deep presence. And then there are some times where it feels like I'm back to square one with the monkey mind and with the thoughts. And it just seems like there's a whole orchestra that is not in sync yelling in my head, if that makes sense. And it can be really, really rough and really frustrating when that happens. But you have to acknowledge it and realize that it just has to be. Like, if that's what's meant to be, that's what's meant to be. And again, that's going to sound really, really strange. But if you're doing this practice, you're going to know what I'm talking about. So this journey, I put journey in quotes because it's not really, well, looking back, it can feel like a journey, but you gotta think of this as it's just another thought if you talk about it in terms of a journey. And the whole awakening journey, if you want to get into that part of meditation, which when I started, I didn't really feel like that was the direction I wanted to go. But in recent months, that's changed since I started to plan for the meditation retreat, actually. And for me, what stuck out about why I wanted to try this was to tame my mind. And I'm going to get into that in a second as well. Sometimes emotions can be extremely strong, especially when working what is called shadow work. Pushing things away never works. You have to confront your demons, so to speak, head on. So what I'm trying to get into with this is that when emotions come up, you can't ignore them, and they are very, very, very strong. And when you're dealing with a chronic illness, you can have emotions that I feel like people never talk about. And I've talked about this in live streams and previous videos in the past. But the emotions that come up with chronic illness often involve grief of loss of what you had before. As much as I live in the now, even now, like there are still times where I miss what I can do when I'm confronted with limitations. There are times when I get really, really frustrated because, I would love to have a break from the needles. I'd love to have a break from having to worry about taking medication every month. It's a little bit easier now that I don't need to do daily medication. But, there are still times where you wish you didn't have to plan around when you're going to take your next needle so that you can just live a normal life. Like, I'd love to be able to live the way I do right now, but not have to be on the medication. Like, I'm young. I hate taking medication as it is. And I'd like to be able to go off of that sometimes. Like, I'd like to have a break. It's kind of like, I feel that way with the being gluten-free too. I really wish I could get a break. Like, when people who aren't around me have me leave for a few days, they can go back to eating some of the stuff that we used to enjoy as a family and not have to worry about that particular part. But for me, I never ever get a break. And it would be nice to have a break. But unfortunately, that's just not the way it is. And things aren't just meant to be like that. So there can be times when there's really, really heavy grief that comes up. And limitations, grief about the limitations. You can mourn who you were before. And definitely sometimes mental health issues come up too when you're stuck and unable to do anything. This is less for me now because I am living quite a normal life with the terms of I can often plan on going to an event and make it without much of an issue. I haven't had to miss much. There are definitely days where my productivity is lower, which is really, really frustrating. And I get really, really frustrated when I feel like I'm not performing at my peak, but I just tell myself now, there's not much I can do about this in this situation. You either do the best you can in the moment if it involves something that you're kind of required to do, or you take a break. And in terms of you have a rest day, when you wanted to do a bunch of other things. It's about prioritizing in the end. So that's really, really important as well, that I think people need to focus on and that I think people need to know about, because some of these things, like, you're not gonna see out front. It's going to be stuff that happens in the background, and it's stuff that you find out over time. I hope that makes sense. As I said, pushing things away never works. So people think that when they're meditating, they're not supposed to have any thoughts. But the whole idea is to let the thought come, let the thought be, and let it go. Your thoughts are constantly competing for your brain's attention, and it's actually like more about meditating on the thoughts. And like, you don't want to be in a state of daydream at all, but I think people get it wrong when they think their mind should be totally quiet, especially at the start. It's not going to be. Actually, when you slow down, you're going to find out just how jumpy the mind really is, and sometimes you find that out accidentally, and sometimes it just is a matter of, oh, I tried meditation, I can't do it, my thoughts just go crazy. And you want to know what I tell people in that case? That's great, you're noticing them. That's the very first step. Keep at that, and it'll eventually work out. And I don't know if they actually pay attention to me in that case, but that's what you want to do. So, as I was stressing earlier, it's not all sunshine and rainbows all of the time. This journey is difficult. So, you need to take the time to acknowledge the harder parts, and there are going to be rough times. That's for sure. Okay. I need to stress that meditation is not a cure, though. It's only a tool. I think it's a very, very important tool, and I think it's a very, very useful tool. But people think that they can suggest mindfulness or meditation and all of your problems will just disappear, and it doesn't work like that. As I said earlier, this can actually become harder during some periods of time. Like, there are maybe cases where you need to work with a therapist, or you need to work with other methods to try and work through those past things and the mental health stuff and all of that, which I'm not going to get into because I'm not an expert. But essentially, things can come up where you may need help to deal with them, whether that's from a mental health professional, from your family doctor, whatever the case may be. You will want to seek out help, because sometimes this journey can become very, very difficult. And as I say, it's journey in quotes. It can be very, very difficult on when things arise. I'm thankful that I have not really had this issue, but there have been times where things have definitely been strong, and you wonder whether you can continue, and you have doubts, but you stick with it, and it rewards itself in dividends. And I'm going to get into this in a minute, but meditation is not a short-term thing. It's something that takes a lot of time and a lot of practice and a lot of discipline in order to reap the rewards, essentially. So it's not something that I can sit here and tell you, oh, in a week, you're going to be totally fine. No. I've been meditating pretty much daily since 2019, July of 2019. I'm going to get into how I got into meditation, but essentially it's something that is reaping rewards now, but it took several months before I started to see really any benefit. And that was even with the chronic pain. Like, it's not something that you're going to see results overnight with. And I would actually say, put the results that you're expecting out of your mind and out of your subconscious. Like, keep that as this is my goal, but expect the unexpected when it comes to this. Because, like, the reason why I started meditation was to control the jumping mind, and because I had actually broken my ankle. I'm going to get into this in a minute, but because of how my mind was behaving is the reason why I started it. And then it was 3, maybe even 4 months later that I really started to notice a decrease in my chronic pain. Now, this could be because I was on Aimovig for that much longer. It could have been, or maybe it was because I started. I can't even remember the timing of the Aimovig with the timing of the meditation, but I know it was around the same. I think it was around the. No, I don't remember anymore, but I'm not sure. I may have not started the Aimovig until the year after. I don't even remember, guys. It's been so long now. It's like 2019 is so long ago now. It feels like it was just yesterday, but it's been a while. This situation about how people expect results really quickly with mindfulness is like comparable to me with how if people were like how they are with, oh, if you just were more positive and got out more, you'd do so much better with your illness. Like they're like, oh, you should try mindfulness. I hear it works so well. It does with time, but you gotta have the desire to want to go in that direction too. Like people think that it's like almost like a hard pill that you have to swallow, but if you're going to be doing something for like, so when I sit, so I have my legs crossed right now, I sit like this. If you're going to be sitting like this for like multiple minutes a day, you're going to want to be enjoying it. You don't want it to become something you hate. And this is actually why I say also too with exercise, like find something that you enjoy, because you're doing it for like so much time. You don't want to be hating every second of it. So if you're not into it, why torture yourself? Like it's clearly not the right thing. I mean, we all would love to be able to enjoy meditation and mindfulness, but I think for some people it may not be the right path, or they may not be ready, and that's perfectly okay. Like you may never be ready, but that's okay. And people need to acknowledge that everybody is on a different journey. Not only are we on a different trajectory with our chronic illnesses, which is why I don't think we should be comparing each other. Like, it's important that I have stressed that before, that like, not only should we not be comparing each other with how we're doing with migraines or IIH or whatever chronic illness we have compared to someone else who has it, we're on a completely different journey. And because of that, like because of how unique it is, it's not something that you can just expect the same results from someone else. It's helpful to maybe get tips on things you can try, or to raise awareness and be able to share your story, which is great, but you're not going to likely have a similar outcome to someone, even if your story is very similar. Like, I think this journey is so individual. And I'm talking about the journey with IIH and migraines now. Not really the journey with meditation. The journey with meditation, I haven't seen enough to really comment on it. So if you want that, I suggest you check out a channel that has meditation as the primary goal. So for me, meditation has gone way beyond helping manage my chronic illness and chronic pain. There's so much benefit to all parts of my life because the practice goes beyond just my actual time sitting like this. It bleeds into every part of my life and into every moment of my life. Like I said, when I started this, I was trying to tame my mind. That was my goal. That was the idea of why I started. And it's because I actually broke my ankle. So I'm going to go back to this here. So this was me, I would say, I think this was in August of 2019, because I'm actually on my boot here without my crutches. So I was just getting back into walking. So it was probably the end of August of 2019. I'd have to actually look at the photo and see when it was taken. But the reason why I took this photo actually was because I was impressed that I not only maintained my weight loss, but I had continued to lose weight while unable to exercise. And I honestly believe that meditation had a bit of a part of this, as well as just, watching my calories really closely. So that is that. And so how I actually broke my ankle was I was on the stairs coming down. I actually sleep in the basement, and I shared this when I talked about my broken ankle. You can actually watch that video. I shared that journey on the channel. and I was on the stairs, and had my head somewhere else. I was not in the present moment at all. And I actually went over, kind of like twisted, kind of like that, and my ankle twisted and snapped. And I realized at that moment that I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing, and I wanted a way to be able to pay attention to what I was doing. So what I did was I got into meditation. I had been listening to my favorite YouTuber. I talked about this during my meditation retreat video, but if it wasn't for ZDoggMD, I would not be talking about meditation right now, and I would have never tried it. And so I'm going to be referring to him as Z. I always do. So Z got me into this in the way that a teacher shows the student the direction that you can go and gives you that initial push. It was me the rest of the way after that, and it was Z who introduced me to Angelo as well. I was a part of the supporter tribe when Angelo became a part of the group and actually started doing interviews with Z. But with Z, and I say Z because that's how they pronounce the letter Z in the US. So if you ask me, oh, who's that? I will say ZDoggMD. However, if you ask me what letter is the letter Z, I will say that's the letter Z. So in at least where I grew up in Canada, we call people the way that they pronounce it. And then if you ask me, oh, well, how would you pronounce this letter? I would say Z. So that's the way that works if you're ever curious about that. But anyway, so when Z does his supporter rounds, he was talking about meditation actually quite a bit earlier than what I picked up on. But it was when I was ready that I really, really started paying attention. And I'm just like, this sounds awesome, being able to tame a jumping mind, which is what I need to do. So I took his advice and I got Sam Harris's Waking Up app. And after 7 days, I think it was a 10-day free trial of the daily meditations, I subscribed. And I was subscribed to the app for a couple of years, up until the point where I felt like it wasn't no longer helping me and it wasn't no longer effective in my own practice. So I have since moved on from that app because I now use the Insight Timer app, which allows me to have a lot more control over what I'm actually doing in my practice. And I don't really do a lot of guided meditation sessions anymore, except for the ones that are posted on Angelo's channel. So that was how I got into meditation, in a bit of a longer story than how I explained it on there and all of that. But the reason why I started, though, is not the reason why I've continued. So, well, it is to a point, but that kind of jumping mind is a very early accomplishment that you kind of gain control over. At least I feel like it is, like to the point where it works the way it does now. And so now, once I started to realize how much it was helping with me manage chronic pain and my chronic illness and stress and anxiety, that is now the reason why I continue with the practice. And now it's kind of gotten into, I'm really, really interested in actual awakening and the enlightenment and the spiritual aspect of meditation, which I'm not going to get into because it is not something I want to talk about. This part of my meditation practice is extremely personal to me, but I will share the reasons why I do meditation in terms of the management of chronic pain and chronic illness, because that's where I feel like it can be the most benefit. But as for anything else, and the deeper meaning behind why I meditate is a lot more personal, and it's not something I want to talk about publicly. And I honestly, guys, I don't talk about meditation even privately. Like when I told my family, oh, I'm going to be going on a meditation retreat, they're like, you meditate? Like, they had no idea. Like, a lot of my family members were like, oh, we had no idea that you did that. So, And I'm just like, yeah, that's because I don't talk about it. Like, so I find that spirituality and that part of my life is extremely personal, and it's because I believe it should be. So, like, when people bring up their religion, this is essentially my religion without religion, essentially. So, like, because of that, because of how I feel about religion in itself being a very personal thing and feel like it should be, then, like, that's why I really don't talk about this much. And you won't hear me talk about it except for in the videos that I choose to talk about it. So, yeah. So, as I was saying, any benefits took time to notice. And you cannot say once or twice and expect meditation to be immediately effective. And I mention only migraines when it comes to this because by the time I found meditation and had it really, really benefiting me, it was kind of the time where my IIH was basically in remission. So I really don't know how I would have managed this with actual IIH. Like, my time with IIH actually was quite short. By the time I was diagnosed, I feel like I was sickest with the IIH stuff before diagnosis. And it's because I started to lose weight. Well, it took a while at the start. So it took about 3 months to lose weight. And I will bring up weight loss. I know people probably get mad at me and frustrated with me when I do this, but it seems to have been what's worked. And again, and actually getting into that, I wonder if it helps with both because weight management is really important. And giving myself the best chance to be able to maintain my weight loss is the best chance of keeping my IIH in remission that is at least in my control. So this, I honestly think, helps because it reduces stress. And some of you may have heard about something called mindful eating. So this is where you aren't distracted when you're eating. And it does actually reduce the amount of portions. And not eating when you're bored. And, like, there's a difference between eating when you're bored and wanting a treat. And there's a difference between binging while you're watching TV and not. And it's really actually interesting because I catch myself when I'm actually doing this now. And so, yeah, that's the biggest thing that I wanted to talk about with that was just there are some benefits that bleed into the rest of your life from your meditation practice. And particularly when you're picking up those thoughts that come up. So, are you guys wanting to know how the best way on how I think people should get started with this? So, here's what I tell people who want to get started into meditation. I would suggest using an app if you have a smartphone, and most people do, even in Android. There's apps for that as well. And I would say start with guided meditations because this is like starting a new exercise program and the thoughts of you want to make sure you have a guide, I think, at the start because you're not going to know what the heck you're doing. And now, just sitting there with your thoughts, I don't think is going to be a terrible thing. Like, I think you'd figure it out. But the thing is if you have a guided meditation and good guided meditations, you know whether you're progressing and you know and you're kind of guided along what you're supposed to do. It's kind of like being taught at the start. And so I first started out again with Sam Harris's Waking Up app. I wasn't actually able to grab a photo for here because they're only available on mobile. And I actually did take a picture of this the few other times I've talked about my meditation journey and did an edited video. So if you want to check those out, you can. But the Sam Harris's app is really, really good for beginners, I would say. You're gonna probably again get to the point where I kind of got to, and you might find another person who does guided stuff better. And actually, I didn't write this down, but if you're kind of low on money because the Waking Up app is quite expensive, especially if you're on a really, really strict budget, I would suggest Adyashanti's channel. So it's ADAYA and then SHANTI, I believe is how you spell that. Yeah. So if you want to get guided sessions and kind of the more into the spiritual aspect of meditation, that would be a really, really good direction. And Insight Timer is also good, but I found that I haven't done many guided meditations on there, and I find it's because that the app, it's just a basically collection of guided meditations, and it's kind of up to you to filter through what is really good and what isn't. And I find that there's a lot of bad stuff on there. Not only does it tweak my scientific brain with the way that some things are worded, because some of this does kind of get into a little bit of the woo aspect of Eastern stuff, especially on the Insight Timer app, where it's kind of just a collection of stuff. But there's just a lot of not so great things as well, and it takes time and practice to know what is good and what isn't, and all of that. But it spooked me scientifically. So I use the Insight Timer app, but I mainly use the timer, and I have a kind of background sound meditation type thing that I listen to. And it's just because I'm so used to listening to at least some type of white noise. And it's because it's something I had to do in order to tune out the tinnitus when I had that. Actually, another thing I notice is that my tinnitus has really gone away recently. It's not as nearly as bad now. I still use white noise because I like the sound and it soothes me, and it's probably just because something I got used to when I was sick. But yeah, I mean, I still need a fan to sleep, so that's where that is. And like I said, I use the Insight Timer app mainly now that I have a very solid practice. I'll occasionally go on YouTube, search up the channels that I like for guided meditation, and sometimes there's really, really good guided meditations on there. But essentially, just finding the right meditations for you, and you find that with time. I think there's a couple of other apps that are really popular. One is called Headspace, and I think I've seen an advertisement for another one that kind of has more sound meditations, and that's called Calm. But essentially, I think Headspace would be another great one. I haven't actually used it myself, so I can't tell you. But if, wanting to get into that, that's another place you could start. Now, if this is really something that piques your interest, there are a couple of books that I do think people should check out. So, let's see here. So we've got Awake, It's Your Turn. This is by the person who led my retreat, which is Dr. Angelo DeLullo. And along with that, if you pair it with this one called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, these two books are essentially, I think, the best way to get into either one of these topics. You could read the one and read the other first. I don't think it really matters. But essentially, if you're wanting more books on that, I would suggest those two. And this is not sponsored. Like, anything I've talked about in this video is something I've either used or heard about, and I will say when I haven't tried it myself, as I did with the Headspace app. But, those are the best ways I would say to kind of check this out. The thing is, though, as I would be careful with the books, because this is something you really do have to experience. It's not something you can read your way through. Like, it's really helpful to get tips, and especially Angelo's book, because it's almost like a direct guide into this journey, I would say. But it's something that you don't want to spend too much time in books, because then it can, these are all just still thoughts. And I think with meditation, it's really something you just gotta do. So yeah, guys, I think that's kind of it on today's video. This has been a long one. I knew it was going to be, though, when I wrote this out, because I had so much I wanted to talk about. But again, if you're wanting to follow me off of my YouTube channel, you can do so at the following. So I'm also going to talk about this, though, because I want to start emphasizing this for the podcast. So I'm available on Instagram at Awareness with Ashley. Facebook is just the same as my YouTube channel name, Ashley Stuart. And Twitter is my old handle at Ashley Stuart 94. There are a couple capitals in there, unlike before. And TikTok to find the short videos that get released. You can find me at Awareness with Ashley, or if you want more kind of fun things that have nothing to do with IIH or migraines, you can find me at Ashley Enjoys Music. If you're wanting to support my work and get access to the videos edited on the podcast version, you can do so on locals.com. So with that one, you can find the link in the description for that. So it's ashleystewart.locals.com for the podcast. It's also linked in the podcast information section, along with where the links to my social media. But I think that's it for this one, guys. I thank you for joining me. I'm just going to check and make sure I haven't had any comments, which I doubt it. But yeah, so if you guys are wanting any more information, feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out to me via email. That's available on my link bio page and all of that. Although I should say I'm really, really bad at checking emails. I do it maybe once a week for the channel. So yeah, if that starts to get busier though, I would start doing that more frequently. But that's where you can find me. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll hopefully be here next week. Bye everyone.